Today, we're going to dive into a story that, yeah, it's about a single farmer in Bengal. But really, it's so much more than that. It's a story about struggle, about faith, and about the incredible power of hope when the odds feel impossible. It's a journey that, I think, speaks to every single one of us.
The soil does not lie. Just think about that for a second. This isn't just about putting seeds in the ground. It's about a deep, almost sacred promise between a person and the earth. You give it everything, your sweat, your love, even your grief, and it gives back. This idea, it really sets the stage for everything that's about to happen.
So, let's paint a picture. Imagine your whole life moves not by a clock on the wall, but by the sun, the moon, and the seasons. Your world is built on one massive, predictable, life-giving event, the monsoon. This was the farmer's world. Sure, it was full of hard work, but it was a world of harmony, of certainty.
And this timeline, it just lays that life out perfectly. March, you're preparing the soil. May, you're planting the seeds for the future. June, that's when the rains come, the big promise from the sky. And then October is the harvest, when all that faith and work pays off. This wasn't just a schedule, This was a rhythm they had lived by for generations.
But what happens when that rhythm, the one thing you can always count on, just stops? This is where the story pivots. The predictable suddenly becomes the unthinkable. The sky, which was always a partner, just goes completely silent.
I mean, everything. Their food, their family, their whole community, their future. It was all built on this rhythm. It was the bedrock of their entire world. The rains coming was as certain as the sun coming up in the morning. That was their security.
And then, one year, it just broke. June came, but the monsoon didn't. Days turned into weeks, the weeks stretched into a month, and the sky just stayed this clear, almost mocking blue. The very foundation of their world had just vanished.
And this chart, this shows you just how bad it was. Look at that. The year before, they got 300 millimeters of rain, plenty to make everything grow. This year, 15. 1-5. That's not a drought, that's a void. That tiny little bar on the chart meant the fields were turning to dust.
So what do you do when your world is literally turned upside down? This is where the real test begins. It's not just about surviving anymore. It's about resilience. It's about what a person does when everything they've ever known is just gone.
You can see the desperation growing step by step. First, there's the physical fight, digging the wells deeper and deeper, only to hit dry dust. Then comes the heartbreaking sacrifice, selling a family cow, which is so much more than livestock. It's a part of the family, just for a little grain. And finally, when all human effort has failed, the entire community turns to their faith, sending their prayers up to that silent sky. But the biggest battle wasn't in the fields. It was inside the farmer's own mind. On one side, you have this crushing despair, the dead earth, the empty sky, the very real gnawing hunger. But on the other, there were these small, stubborn embers of hope, remembering what the land could be, feeling the potential in one tiny seed, and of course, the strength you get from your family. And it's right there, in the middle of that internal fight, in that darkness, that the turning point finally comes. And it's not some big dramatic storm. It's something much, much smaller, quieter, a single sprout of hope. After all the digging, and the selling, and the praying, when it seemed like all was lost, and then
This, just 1 inch of rain. Now that wasn't nearly enough to save the crop or fill the wells. Practically speaking, it was almost nothing, but this wasn't about being practical. It was about possibility. It was a sign. After months of crushing silence, the sky had finally whispered back.
it was not a storm. It was a promise. That says it all, doesn't it? The rain meant the conversation with the heavens had started again. It was a sign that they hadn't been forgotten. And it was just enough moisture to let that little seed of hope he'd been protecting finally start to grow. So from that single inch of rain, they managed to salvage a tiny crop. But the real harvest that year? It wasn't the grain. It was the wisdom. It was everything they learned from walking through that fire and making it to the other side. And this chart tells you so much about what they valued. Look at what they did. Sure, half of it was food for the family. But a full quarter was set aside as seeds for next year. That's a huge bet on the future. Another chunk went to pay back the neighbors who had shared what little they had. This wasn't a harvest of profit. It was a harvest of community, of continuity.
So what does it all boil down to? Well, the story really shows us that resilience isn't just about being tough and gritting your teeth. It's about protecting that little bit of hope when everything else is gone. It shows us that a community's real strength comes from how tightly it's woven together. And most of all, it reminds us that hope is the one seed that can grow in any kind of soil.
And that really leads us with a question to think about, doesn't it? We all have our own droughts, times of loss or silence or despair. So the question is, what's the drought you're facing in your life right now? And maybe more importantly, where in that cracked, dry earth can you find your own tiny sprout of hope?